benefit, there is no addendum for tonight's meeting. No correspondence has been received regarding any of the files. The PowerPoint presentations, if anyone is curious, are also available on the City of Kingston's website below the reports on the agenda. All right, Mr. Chair, you can proceed.
Thank you very much. And thank everybody for being here tonight. I'm going to apologize in advance. I have a dog that will be scratching at my patio door on and off. So if I jump up, that's what's happening. I'll read. We have one public meeting tonight, and then we have a couple of things on the agenda, action items. I'll read the notice of collection. Personal information collected as a result of this public hearing and process is collected under the authority of the Planning Act and will be used to assist in making a decision on this matter. All names, addresses, opinions, and comments may be collected and may form part of the minutes, which will be available to the public. Questions regarding this collection should be forwarded to the Director of Planning Services. The purpose of public meetings is to present planning applications in a public forum as required by the Planning Act. Following presentations by the applicant, committee members will be afforded an opportunity to ask questions, for clarification or further information. The meetings will then be open to the public for comments and questions. Interested persons are requested to give their name and address for recording in the minutes. Interested members of the public can email the committee clerk or the assigned planner if they wish to be notified regarding a particular application. No decisions are made at public meetings concerning applications unless otherwise noted. The public meeting is held to gather public opinion. An exception to this rule is combined reports, which consolidate the public meeting and comprehensive reports. These applications are deemed by staff as straightforward and routine. This business practice has been in place for a number of years and is received by the applicants as efficient customer service and effective use of committee time. Please note that staff use discretion in determining if an application can be a combined public meeting comprehensive report to expedite the approval process. Public meeting reports are provided to inform the public of all relevant information. Information gathered is then referred back to planning services staff for the preparation of a comprehensive report and recommendation to planning committee. This means that after the meeting tonight, staff will be considering the comments made by the public in their further review of the applications. When this review is completed, a report will be prepared, making a recommendation for action to this committee. The recommendation is typically to approve with conditions or to deny. The committee then makes a recommendation on the applications to City Council. City Council has the final say on the applications from the city's perspective. Following council decision, notice will be circulated in accordance with the Planning Act. If a person or public body would otherwise have an ability to appeal the decision of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Kingston to the local planning appeal tribunal, but that person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the City of Kingston before the bylaw is passed, that person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision. So we'll move on to our first and only public meeting tonight, which is Centennial Drive and Resource Road. So whoever the representative of the proposal is can now have the floor.
Sure. Just while Derek loads the presentation, Mr. Chair, Ms. Gilchrist from IBI Group is the agent and her microphone is now live.
Thank you.
There we are.
Sorry, go ahead. There you go.
Excellent. I was talking to myself. How often does that happen in these meetings? Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and to James as well for organizing. My name is Tess Gilchrist, and I'm a planner with IBI Group, and I'm going to speak to the zoning bylaw amendment application for the Cataraqui Estates Business Park this evening. It is a total of 6 lots, 4 of which I see have municipal addresses, and they're listed there. The municipal addresses are also interchanged with the lots within the plan of subdivision. So if there's any confusion on which lots we're referring to, by all means, ask me about that. Next slide, please. The purpose of the zoning amendment is to permit those uses described in the official plan designation, and and which is the business park industrial. It also establishes performance standards for the site-specific zone and addresses matters such as open storage and parking requirements. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, there are a total of 6 lots that are subject to this zoning bylaw amendment application, 3 of which are on the north side of Resource Road, adjacent to Centennial. Lot 437, 438, and 452. And then on the south side of Venture Drive, lot 430, lot 444, and lot 446. Next slide, please. The areas of the subject lots vary quite significantly. The parcels on the south side of Venture are quite large, whereas the parcels on the north side are somewhat smaller, and they do generally have large frontage on Centennial Drive and Resource Road and Venture Drive. Next slide, please. These are Google Street View images. Though I've been around the traffic circles many times, I was not out personally to take photos, but these subject parcels are currently vacant within the business park. Next slide, please. As previously mentioned, all 6 lots are located within the business park industrial official plan designation. The 3 northern lots abut open space. I will note that the mapping for the city indicates the open space designation over a portion of lot 437, but we believe this is a mapping error, and that the entirety of lot 437, pardon me, is within the business park industrial designation. And I will follow up with the city and real estate department to confirm that. The center of the business park is designated general industrial, and then on the south side of the three southern lots are located adjacent to the Cataraqui North neighborhood, which has a secondary plan. But these 3 lots are separated from the neighborhood with a hydro corridor that runs east-west. Next slide, please. The proposal. So there are no specific development proposals associated with this zoning bylaw amendment application. It is purely an exercise of matching the zoning in the business park to the official plan designation. And I will note that all future development will be subject to site plan control, and a detailed review of each proposal and supporting documents will be required as part of that approval process. Next slide, please. I will just do a very high-level summary of the PPS. If there are any questions, I'm happy to speak to it, and there's a more fulsome explanation within the justification report. But in general, the proposed zoning amendment is consistent with the new and shiny 2020 PPS. These lands are located within the urban boundary and are designated for employment use. The zoning would be an efficient use of land and resources and would not result in the uneconomic extension of services. The proposed uses are compatible with adjoining uses and would not represent a public health or safety issue. Next slide, please. The 6 subject lots are designated business park industrial in the city's official plan, and the permitted uses are quite specifically listed in section 3.6.A.1, and the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is consistent with this list. Lot 437 is also subject to site-specific policy area 62 in the official plan, which specifies that the property located at 193 Resource Road, indoor storage of equipment shall also be permitted. The proposed zoning does not conflict with this special policy. Next slide, please. A wholesome review of official plan policy, of course, is included in the justification report, but I will run through the various sections for which are relevant for the justification of this amendment. Section 2.2.6 business districts are intended to accommodate employment opportunities, which includes the business park industrial designation. Section 2.3.7 for employment policies, the city is committed to promote and protect employment areas for economic growth and provide a range of opportunities for its residents. Section 2.7 speaks to land use compatibility principles, and the term compatible in the OP is defined as the ability of various land uses, building sites, or urban design treatments to coexist with one another in a manner that will not have an undue physical or functional adverse effect on existing or proposed development in the area or pose an unacceptable risk to environmental or human health. And the proposed permitted uses are consistent with the official plan policy for the business park industrial designation and are generally compatible with the existing business park. All future development will be subject to site plan control, as I mentioned, and the site plan process includes a detailed review of development and provides an opportunity to implement any necessary mitigation measures. For any future sensitive land uses proposed, a noise study must be conducted, and those 2 uses are, I'll get to it in a moment, but are proposed complementary uses being a daycare and a hotel. So a noise study would be a requirement to lift a holding provision for those 2 uses. And this, of course, is in place to ensure that the existing business park employment uses remain viable and that any proposed sensitive uses are not negatively impacted by existing employment uses, that two-way relationship. Section 3.6.2 and 3.6.3 pertain to supporting economic base and the city's role. The city strongly supports a strong and diversified economic base and will continue to promote the city's 4 business parks, which of course includes the Cataract Way Estates Business Park. Section 3.6.7 employment areas will be protected from fragmentation, the intrusion of sensitive uses, traffic issues, adverse effects. And section 3.6.12 through 3.6.14 and 3.6.16 identify complementary uses that are contemplated in the business parks, and the specific policies have been incorporated into the proposed zoning amendment. And as per section 3.6.17, within employment areas, proposed development is subject to several criteria. All future development will be subject to site plan control, which would address these matters, including but not limited to safe access, loading areas, parking, design, screening, those types of items. As per section 3.6A, the business park industrial policies list the permitted uses that are contemplated for the designation, as well as provisions for complementary uses, which have been directly incorporated into the proposed zoning amendment. Lastly, section 9.59 of the official plan provides direction on matters for planning committee and council to consider, which of course, first and foremost, is conformity of the proposal with the intent of the official plan. There's several other criteria as well. Next slide, please. The Cataraqui Business Park is within zoning bylaw 76-26, and the existing zoning for lots 430, 444, and 446 on the south side of Venture Drive are M1-12, and lots 438 and 452 on the north side of Resource Road are Business Park 2 zone. Lot 437 is Special Business Park Zone 6. And the proposed zoning is a site-specific business park zone. It would be one zone for all 6 of the lots. Next slide, please. The new site-specific BPX zone would be consistent directly with the business park industrial policies of the OP. And the proposed amendment is compatible with existing development, preserves flexibility through the performance standards, and open storage is contemplated to be permitted. However, visual impacts would be mitigated through the use of setbacks and landscaping, and further mitigation measures associated with open storage would be implemented through site plan. Next slide, please. I included the zoning matrix broken up over 4 slides. However, it is also included as Exhibit J in the planning report. Thank you very much, Megan. This was a helpful exercise to compare and contrast in some ways the existing 3 zones that apply to the various lots in comparison to what is being proposed. I will note IBI met with the City of Kingston planning staff and representative from the Business, Real Estate and Environment Department last week to discuss technical comments received on the application. And as a result of this meeting, there are a few small changes to the zoning matrix, which I've included in red. And primarily those are associated with the language for removing the holding symbol on daycare and hotel. We have specific language from engineering to include there, and a clarification on the size of parcel that is able to have complementary use provisions. And the matrix provides a breakdown on the permitted uses, permitted complementary uses, and performance standards. The performance standards for what is being proposed in the site-specific zone are generally consistent with one of the existing zones, with the exception of lot area, and all other provisions were intended to preserve as much flexibility for future development as possible, considering that some of these lots may be further subdivided by the city, and depending on market demand and what's necessary. And if you could advance to the next slide, please. Apologies, I should have prompted you sooner. These are the proposed performance standards. Again, just reiterating that what's being proposed is already representative of one of the 3 existing zones for those lots. Next slide, please. And the open storage provisions are included to limit the location, the size, and to implement screening requirements as well. Next slide, please. And lastly, the proposed amendment sets out specific parking rates for the proposed industrial, office, and complementary uses, as the permitted uses that are contemplated by the official plan do not translate to the defined uses in the zoning bylaw 7626 for parking rates. So to avoid additional kind of confusion or lack of clarity there, the intent is to put the parking rates and size requirements into the site-specific zone for these 6 lots. Next slide, please. In summary, the requested amendment is appropriate. It is consistent with PPS, conforms to the OP, and is compatible with surrounding land uses. The proposed zoning amendment represents good planning and is in the public interest. Last slide, please. I welcome the opportunity to respond to any questions the Planning Committee members or any members of the public may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll now turn to the staff planner to make comment.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you. This is Megan Rabideau speaking. Pursuant to the requirements of the Planning Act, a notice of statutory public meeting was provided by advertisement in the Kingston Whig Standard 20 days in advance of this public meeting. As well, a courtesy notice was placed in the Kingston Whig Standard on May 12th, 2020. To date, we have received no written submissions regarding this application. Staff in planning and other city departments are still reviewing the application. And any comments received at this public meeting or in any subsequent correspondence will be reviewed by staff. Responses to comments and questions related to the proposal, along with a staff recommendation about the application, will be presented in a comprehensive report to the committee at a future meeting.
Thank you very much. I'll now turn to the committee. If there are any members of the committee that have any questions of the applicant or staff. Yes, Councillor Sanik.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I have a question for lot 452. So there is no address associated with 452. Like, would we just refer to it as lot 452? It at the title page of the PowerPoint slide deck, 452 doesn't actually have an address. So do we just call it 452?
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you for your question, Councillor Stanek. Yeah, for those lots subject to the current application that do not currently have municipal addresses, I've referred to them throughout the public meeting report by their lot numbers.
Okay.
So yes, to answer your question.
Okay, no problem. The comment that you talked about for lot 437 and about how it has a partial open space designation on it. I was on planning committee when we first looked at the Cataraqui Business Park Estates. And I think that was a swap. We were developing land, one of the other lots to the south, and it might have karst lands in there. So it was a swap in turn of developing one of those lands. Open space was going to be left on 437. It was a long time ago, but I don't think it was a mistake that the open space is on lot 437. I think there's a reason why it shows the open space the way that it does. I would have to do digging and consult with some other people that might have been on the committee back then to try to remember, but I don't think it's a mistake. So I just wanted to put that forward. For 4 out of the 6 lots that we're talking about tonight, I don't have a problem, the comprehensive report, no issue, that sort of thing. But I do have a problem developing lot 438 and 452. 438 is 215 Resources Road. When all of us started on this term of council, somebody wrote us when we were doing all the climate change action plans and forming that committee, all that sort of thing. Someone wrote to us specifically about those two lots, 438 and 452. I will forward that person's email to planning committee and to planning staff to form a record tonight, because she makes really good points about how pure and dense and what a great forest is actually on there. If we all look at Exhibit B, that's in our PDF document for tonight's agenda, you can see, oh, I don't have it here, where is it? You can see how dense it is of those evergreens. And you know, like of climate change, that person's email, she actually outlines how many acreage it is. And it's just really dense trees. And we know that we can't do a lot of climate change protection, like even not as much as we had planned from last night's meeting, because we have COVID and everything's being deferred till next year, the year before, even offering new trees for people to plant on their own property. That entire program we wanted to kickstart in 2020 is now going to be delayed to 2021. And we also want to double our tree canopy in our urban forest. And this is the urban area because we're below the 401. And my last point too is that for effective tree coverage in any city, Environment Canada says that we should try to have 30% tree coverage. And this is going to be another huge loss to our tree coverage. As far as I know, we haven't done the mapping for our urban tree coverage in many years, like going back to, I think, maybe 2012, many years. And I don't even know, like if last time we did it, we were at 22% for the urban area. It's right there in our official plan that we want to try to strive to be at 30%. And this is just going to be a hit. And these two properties, lot 438 and 452, are in council's control since we own the Cataraqui Business Park. And so I have a problem with clear cutting those two lots, especially because directly south of Resource Road, like that is where we did the milk plant, and we clear cut those properties of every single tree. And you can see the lots below 1315, right, where we have another company that was totally clear cut, and it used to be dense evergreen forest as well. So those are my comments, my questions. I don't know if staff can answer when we're going to be doing another urban forest tree coverage mapping to see what percentage we're at. And the last one, just to confirm, in case we did do one a couple of years ago, I wasn't aware of, I think our last one was like 8 years ago or so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is Megan Roberty speaking of
Yes.
the Planning Department.
Thank you.
Thank you for your questions and comments, Councillor Osanek. To address your first comment regarding the open space designation that is shown on the official plan mapping, this is something that planning staff are currently looking into and will include a response in the comprehensive report as far as confirming the accuracy of that mapping based on the draft plan of subdivision that was approved for this business park. In terms of the timing of a future urban forest tree coverage study or updated mapping, I'm not personally aware of whether that is something that is currently planned or scheduled for updating. That may be something that Mr. Park could speak to, but we're certainly happy to report back to you on that question.
Mr. Chair, I believe Mr. Park has raised his hand, as well as Ms. Bajwa, who's with the city's real estate. So we can go to Mr. Park and then Ms. Bajwa.
Thank you.
Mr. Park, you should be able to accept the unmuting and unmute yourself.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. We will consult with forestry as well as parks as to the next scheduled urban tree canopy survey and report back on that within the comprehensive report.
Thank you.
Thank you. And who's the other person that?
Go ahead, Ms. Bajwa.
Hi, through you, Mr. Chair. This is Saru Bajwa speaking. I'm Land Development Manager with the city's Business, Real Estate and Environment Department. I would like to thank you, Councillor Sanik, on your questions. Regarding the open space, I have provided some information which shows that lot 437 is the remaining part, which was designated business park, and some part of it was designated open space. It is no more part of lot 437, but again, I will follow up with the planning department and provide confirmation on that. Regarding the lot 438 and 452, I think we would need an offline discussion with you on that part. I was not aware of the email that you have mentioned receiving from a member of the public. I would like to confirm that we do have a sale in progress already for 438 property. It is a local company for research and development. Like typical sale agreements, it is the sale agreement is conditional on site plan approval, and they're going to submit their site plan approval soon. We are open to have a dialogue on that and have a discussion and give you all information and go from there.
Yeah, that's disappointing to hear that for 38 already has plans. So 438 is 7 acres. Is that right?
Could somebody confirm that?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, I can confirm that lot 438 is 2.99 hectares in size.
Well, I don't know what to say. That's really disappointing. That's the larger lot, and yeah.
Thank you.
So we already started to negotiate, like, is there, do you think it could be flexible in going somewhere else to one of the other lots? Or are they going to use the entire size of that lot?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, Councillor Sanik, the negotiations for a particular purchase take a long time. We had been working on this deal for many months, and changes happen with businesses as well. So we are very happy that this local company is looking to expand, and this is an ideal site for their future building expansion. These properties are declared surplus to municipal needs and are part of the employment plans inventory and are being marketed on our website as for sale. And so that is why we have the negotiations done and have the deal for that particular property.
So one further question specifically then about lot 438. The site plan will just be between staff and the company. Like, to tell you the truth, even if site plan comes to planning committee, we don't even really vote on it. It basically comes as an information report to us. So are they going to be saving any trees on that property?
Through you, Mr. Chair, they have not submitted their site plan as yet, but they would be following the site plan guidelines. The planning department can speak to it. So I will leave it with Tim Park to follow up on that question.
And just my other question then, when planning department replies, is if, are they for that big lot, are they building it all out in one phase, or are they going to phase it? Sometimes in our business parks, we sell them the piece of property, but they only use a certain portion, and then they buy the rest of it for expansion in the future. So I'll just also add that if we could have that detail.
Through you, Mr. Chair, Councillor Sanik, with regards to the site plan, we will certainly, we don't know what's being built at this time, is what has been mentioned. And we will certainly look as closely as possible to preserving as many of the trees on the site and working with the applicant to do so. We can certainly do that and have consultation with you if you would like during that process. The phasing I can't really speak to because I'm not privy to the terms of the real estate transaction. I don't know if they plan to build one big building or if they're planning to do it in phases as you discuss. I'm not sure if real estate can speak to that issue or not. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I think Ms. Bajwa has a comment back from Mr. Parks ending
Thank
there.
you. And then I believe I saw Councillor Kiley waving and Councillor Hutchison waving at me. So go ahead.
Chair, yes, there are, these are the points that are discussed at the D level, and they might be building it in phases. And again, these are just part of the agreement of purchase and sale, and it would be good to have an offline discussion on these rather than at a public platform.
I'm sorry,
Councillor
Sanik,
Sanik, you're on mute.
did you want to unmute?
Sorry, I thought it was like purposely cut off. Just the last thing for the
Not yet.
Not yet, exactly. That's the last thing I'll say. When the comprehensive report comes forward, I want it in a.
Oh, you're on mute again.
Councillor Sanik, you've muted yourself again.
There you go.
Sorry,
good.
when the comprehensive report comes through, somehow I just want it so that I can vote for lot 452. We've never really done that before, but I can't support voting for 452. So the wording has to be such that, or, you know, I don't know.
Can
I'm
I
just really
suggest
disappointed.
that we not make a definitive decision because this is a public meeting? But of course, when that comes as a comprehensive report, we all have the right to decide. So right now we should be focusing primarily on questions. So thank you, Councillor Sanik. Councillor Kiley, followed by Councillor Hutchison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you. My question has to do with a comment made by staff and not in the report. But I think it was an illuminating comment and I want to further explore it because I'm trying to understand the process here. If we have the public meeting on an issue and then a comprehensive report will come requesting planning committee's permission to change zoning, what if the zoning isn't changed? What becomes of the deal that's being done?
Could anybody tackle that? A member of staff, probably.
The park?
Through you, Mr. Chair. If the zoning, there's two sets of zoning that are in play here on various parcels. What this report is trying to do is harmonize those permissions across all parcels. So if the report was, if the zoning wasn't approved, then you could still have as of right on these parcels, but it would be limited to the zoning specific to them today, as opposed to the harmonized zoning that's being proposed in this report, if that answers your question.
It helps. So is the deal that's being made before the approval of the harmonization of the zoning, which for the record actually makes sense to me. Is the deal being considered within the current zoning or the potential of future zoning?
I would have to defer that answer to real estate.
Go ahead, Ms. Bajwa.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the deal is based on the current zoning. So,
That's good to hear. So that makes me feel much better, because I was going to question why we're even here if the deal is being made on the potential change. Because I very much share Councillor Osanik's sentiments. And in fact, I was going to make a comment based on the report that at multiple times we heard that it was vacant land. That was the language used, when in fact it's far from that. I think Councillor Osanik said it very clearly about the tremendous value that forested parcels within the urban growth boundary have for climate change, particularly, not to mention air purification and biodiversity. So I'm glad to know that we're not presuming the planning committee will make a change and making negotiations based on that, because I think that as the democratic body, we're here to ensure that we take all those considerations and more in, of course, including the benefit to local small business. But I would very much caution any presumption that zoning will be changed, because in fact, it might not be. So I'm glad to hear that we're only dealing with current zoning, and maybe in the future looking to harmonize based on what the comprehensive report says. And just thank you to Councillor Osanik for bringing these points up.
Thank you. Councillor Hutchison, and then Councillor Hill.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have some comments and a question about the similar concern. But first of all, let me say thank you to staff for this this report and the work that's being done in providing employment lands in the city. I think it's one of the things, the time I've been on council, that has been really well done. That is the development and sale of employment lands, and it's not always easy, but former CAO Hunt was really pressed that really quite a lot, and it's good to see under the new CAO we're doing the same thing, which speaks to the fact there are a lot of other people on city employees who are doing this work in real estate planning and so on. So in the report in general, it seems to be quite good, and it shows where we can go. That said, I have a question along the same theme as Councillor Sanik. It's not quite the same, but has a similar concern, and that is regarding the what is the proposed use of the open space to the north of lots 437 and 438? I think they're labeled OS and OS 13. And above them again is the EPA, one of the EPA sections. So is it just labeled, or does it have a future of some determined sort?
Would someone like, oh, sorry, 1 second, Ms. Bajwa. Go ahead.
thank you, Councillor Hutchinson, for your comments and the question. That open space is, it's generally just an open space. It is designated as open space and will not be used for development. And beyond that is the EPA area, which will stay as EPA area, and no development would occur on those lands.
Okay, so I guess I was looking for more of the nature of it. It sounds to me, based on what Councillor Sanik said, that it's forested. And that's what I was trying to determine when I was reading it myself. I mean, if lot 438 is forested, then is the open space forested, or is it farmer's field, or what all is there? What's it look like?
Do any staff members have a response to the question? Go ahead, Ms. Bajwa.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that area which is north of the business park is treed area, and there are trails going through that area connecting to KNP Trail further. The whole plan of subdivision, when it was done, I was not there, it was done decades ago. But at that time, all kinds of studies were done to understand the quality of the treed area. And at that time, all these blocks, which are designated as business park industrial and general industrial, were to be utilized for future industrial use and were added to employment lands inventory. And those properties which are north of the business park, which are designated as open space and EPA, were to stay undeveloped and contribute to the open space of the city.
Okay, that was the description. I guess I could say that I was thinking about thematically, what we tried to do as a city, and that is partly that, and I think the other councillors got this in the back of their heads as well, is employment lands are important, no doubt about it. And as I said, good work is being done. However, the difficulty in thinking sustainably is you've got your 4 pillars, which I still think we have on the books, and the environmental, the social, the cultural, the economic. And the difficulty is thinking about these in the tension they hold. That is, thinking about them simultaneously all the time. And I know staff knows this, I mean, in terms of thought patterns. But I was just on the KNP Trail there west of Sydenham Road, and there in the tree cover is getting a little on the thin side at certain points anyway. And I think that's what Councillor Sanik is thinking about when you're talking about trails, the KNP Trail. Thank you, Ms. Bajwa, for bringing that up, because it gives substance to something that's just a blot on a map. So I was thinking about how good it is to do tree planting on the edges of forested areas because of the natural protections, and makes the tree survival much greater. So in that sense, I certainly support what the previous 2 councillors said. I think we just want to make sure that we're doing what we can to maintain that creative tension between the pillars of sustainability, which unfortunately, even 15 years ago or so, we weren't doing a very good job of. So that's my comment and question there. My second question has to do with Exhibit J. It's page 81 of 196 in the agenda plus schedule. And it's got to do with the minimum lot area, which is cited as 0 square meters. And I got a couple of questions about that. What does that mean? 0 square meters. How can that be the minimum? Could somebody explain the concept behind that designation, please?
Could a planner comment on that, please?
Ms. Robideau?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so the applicant has proposed a minimum lot area of 0 square meters here. And so there are several existing zones within all of the zoning bylaws in the city of Kingston, which, while they may not indicate a minimum lot area of 0 square meters, they would not have a minimum lot area requirement. So it would be my understanding that that is what the applicant is looking to achieve here. However, I will invite Ms. Gilchrist to perhaps speak to their thinking behind the proposal for a 0 lot area in this instance.
Certainly. Thank you, Megan. My response is very much consistent with yours in that there are other zones that do not require a minimum lot area. And the intent behind this was to preserve flexibility for future development on these lots. And it is something that we could further discuss with staff, as I expect there'll be further back and forth to address comments.
Okay, so I have a follow-up question, just a couple. The first one is, when you're talking about 0, a minimum lot area of 0, what kind of utilization of that land have you got in mind? And I'll tell you why, because it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, even millions, to develop this land. We're putting in water and sewer and so on. It's really expensive. So I would think we would want to have them optimally used. And so when I read 0, I'm thinking, how small are we going here? You know, what are we putting on, what are we envisioning putting on these lots?
Through you,
Perhaps,
Mr. Chair.
thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Yes.
Tess Gilchrist here. It is a challenging task when you are proposing a zoning amendment for future development that has not yet been hashed out in terms of the details, like it would be for a site plan application. So the intent behind these provisions was to preserve the flexibility of the city to sell these lands, and I'm glad that you mentioned that, you know, servicing these lots was a very expensive endeavor. All of these lots are on you know, a registered plan of subdivision, city-owned lands with the intent for future development of employment uses. The intent behind a minimum lot area was of no minimum, effectively, was to preserve flexibility. But I will note also that there is a frontage minimum, which would be the minimum required of frontage on a public road for any future lot. But I'm happy to make note of all these comments and to have further discussion on these items. Thank you.
Okay, so that's a bit more clear and worthwhile, because I know in the past we have had large lots and we've subdivided them, and at a certain point it starts not to really pay. So, or makes it difficult to finish selling out the business part because you haven't got the right size. So
Could I suggest, we have one other counselor who has had patiently his hand up. Can we save, if you have a specific question, that'd be great. We also have the opportunity at the end to make comments and questions. So would you, Councillor Hutchison, are you?
no, I'm done.
Pardon me?
I'm done.
Oh, I'm the only one talking then. I apologize. Councillor Hill, floor is yours.
Well, thanks. And I'm probably just showing my inexperience here, but this is serviced business development land. Is that correct?
Could one of our planners respond?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. This is Megan Rabideau speaking. So these are lands within a city business park that are currently owned by the corporation of the city of Kingston. They're part of a plan of subdivision for the business park. And the subdivision has been prepared with servicing.
So I've heard from Commissioner Hugenboss that service business development land within the city is at a real premium right now. So, and I guess I'm going back to Councillor Osanich. Are you suggesting, Councillor Osanich, that this land be redesignated as conservancy land or something, like taken out of the business development inventory?
Yeah. If,
Just the 2 lots, the 2 out of the 6 lots.
could I suggest that we don't typically ask questions of one another? Now's the opportunity to ask questions of our staff or the proponent's planner. And if we have questions with one another, we definitely can do that before the comprehensive plan.
I was just looking for, so that I could understand better what was being asked here. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. I guess I see no further questions. I don't at this time have any questions. So I will now open it up to the public. If there are any members of the public in attendance that would like to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The member of public would like to speak, so just give us a second while we unmute him, and we'll ask him to provide his name. He's unmuted.
Thank you. 5 minutes, and you just give your name and address if you would. Thank you.
Paul Martin.
Yep.
Paul Martin, 42 Terry Fox Drive. My question is, are you allowed to build hotel or motel then in the industrial park? Does this allow that? Also, I guess I'm just trying to understand what the uses are in the industrial park. Back in 1986 to 1988, I was the industrial commissioner in Kingston Township at the time when we were developing that particular park. And it seems to have evolved a lot, and we're talking business park, we're talking industrial park. I guess I'm just trying to understand Ketterockway. My understanding when we initially put it in place was an industrial park. Has it now become or evolved to a business park? And I guess, you know, listening to council debate this, or the planning committee here, I should say, there seems to be some confusion about what the park should really be. And I guess I'm just curious what direction the city is going on their industrial park in the Ketterockway Industrial Estates. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Typically, we allow the public to ask questions and then they are answered by staff or the proponent planner at the end of the process. Are there any other members of the public that would like to make comment or questions?
Mr. Chair, there's no other members of the public willing to speak at this time.
No problem. So I will now turn it over to the proponent planner or our staff to respond to Mr. Martin's questions.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Chair, Tess Gilchrist for IBI. The proposed zoning would permit a hotel as a complementary use. However, there are limitations on the maximum allowable total floor area of all complementary uses within the business park. And that provision is that all complementary uses, total floor area, not exceed 25% of established or concurrently developed space for permitted employment uses within the business park. Thank you.
Thank you. Were there any other questions that needed clarification from our staff? Seeing none, I will go back to the committee if there are further comments or questions. Now would be the time to bring them forward. Seeing none, I'll declare this public meeting completed. If anybody wishes to submit written comments or questions, that would give you standing in future. Thank you. So we'll move on to our regular planning committee meeting. I'll call the meeting to order. Mover and a seconder for the agenda. Thank you, Councillor Hill. Thank you, Councillor Osanek. All those in favor? Carried. Confirmation of minutes from our May 7th meeting to be confirmed. Mover. Thank you, Councillor Kiley. Thank you, Councillor Hill. All those in favor? Carried. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. Seeing none. Delegations, we have none. Briefings, we have none. I'll just very quickly read the brief business declaration. This portion of the meeting is open to the public. The city has initiated a new process in which members of the public will have the opportunity to speak for up to 5 minutes on comprehensive reports presented before the Planning Committee. Those wishing to provide oral comments at this meeting will be invited to do so. If a person or public body would otherwise have an ability to appeal the decision of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Kingston to the local planning appeal tribunal, but that person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the City of Kingston before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision. And our first business comprehensive report is 328 Queen Street.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Barr is a staff planner as well. Mr. Sands is present as the agent. Should there be any questions?
Super, thank you.
Am I unmuted? Can everyone hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, perfect. My name is James Barr. I'm a planner with the City of Kingston. I have been working on this application and am presenting a recommendation on it tonight. The property is located at 328 Queen Street. So if we can go to the next slide, which is located on the south side of Queen Street between Division and Chapman Street. Next slide, please. The purpose and effect of this application is to rezone the property to allow the existing building to be developed completely with residential units, converting the ground floor commercial unit and basement storage area into 2 additional residential units. The site is currently developed with a 2-story building that has 2 residential units on the 2nd floor and a commercial unit at grade and a basement storage area. The site through the zoning bylaw amendment will maintain its commercial zoning and all the commercial uses associated with that. Multi-unit residential is being added as a new use to the site to facilitate this minor redevelopment. Next slide, please. The lands are located within the central business district, which allows for higher density residential development in standalone buildings where the site does not front onto a mandatory commercial frontage area. Additionally, the first floor must be designed to be converted to commercial in the future should there ever be a need. Next slide, please. This is the map from the official plan, which shows areas in the downtown which are mandatory commercial frontage areas. The site is located on the far left-hand corner. There's a blue star facing Queen Street, and you can see that this site is not part of the mandatory commercial frontage area. Next slide, please. There are no major changes occurring to the site as a result of this application. There will be fencing added to the front of the property, noted in the top corner as amenity area, to provide separation between the public realm and the private amenity space for the units. A bike rack will be mounted and secured to the side of the building. The bike rack is indicated there, and it's going to be located at the end of the parking space on the side of the building. And it will come with a roof cover as well. And a small awning for weather protection is being added to the front of the building to make it look more like a residential unit, to provide some weather protection for patrons entering and exiting that front door. The one vehicular parking space will be maintained where its location currently is, and there's no change associated with that there. Next slide, please. So this is the building that currently exists there today. The top portion here is the elevations as they exist, and the bottom portion is the elevations that are proposed. As part of this application, you can see there are very minor changes. And this site was originally purpose-built to have that commercial unit at grade. And there are no modifications happening that would reduce its ability to be converted back to commercial in the future, should that be required. Next slide, please, as well. I believe these are just additional elevations. And on the bottom right-hand side, west elevation proposed, you can see the bike rack that's proposed on the side of the building there. Next slide, please. So it's planning staff's opinion that the application for zoning bylaw amendment at 328 Queen Street is consistent with the PPS and conforms to the official plan. An amending bylaw has been prepared with the amendments to the zone provisions, and that this this redevelopment of an underutilized commercial space with additional residential units located near commercial amenities, employment, transit, and active transit represents good land use planning and a minor intensification application. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you have here forward.
Thank you. So could our staff comment? Oh, I'm sorry.
I am staff counselor Neil, and I can also confirm that notice was given in accordance with the Planning Act this evening, and we have received no communications written or I guess over the phone, because we don't have verbal anymore at the counter. So we haven't received any communications from members of the public.
Thank you, James. I now open it to members of the committee who may have questions or comments. Yes, Councillor Hutchison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is quite a tight property. I know it well. I have a couple of questions though about related to the. I mean, I accept the general treatment and description of that is in the report. The qualified removal of commercial that'll be able to come back someday, maybe. So, but on the question of amenity space, it's described as that the loss of amenity space is minor. And I'm just wondering, what's the minimum amenity space for, again, for the project?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's James Barr again speaking for everyone on the call. The zoning bylaw amendment, sorry, the zoning bylaw requires that there are 10 square meters of amenity space for each unit, and the development has the ability to provide 16.5 meters of amenity space on site, given the tightness of the existing development that is already there.
Right. So, okay. So
Sorry, cool.
The real problem here is practical. There just isn't enough room to supply the amenity space necessary or required.
That's correct. The building exists as it is, and they're just repurposing the interior of it for additional residential units. I believe the existing building covers almost 70% of the lot area, bearing in mind that there is the parking space and entrance to the side of the building, as well as about a meter of space around the sides and rear of the building. So we're just working with a very tight site that has a small ability to accommodate additional amenity area.
Right, so this is reflected in the parking as well. We've got, it was allowed for one space back in, I think, 94. And it's still one space, even though we've added two bedroom units. So I guess this is related to, if you're going to cut or allow the the parking is being reduced. There's no doubt about that. And so this is related to the bicycle and the bicycle requirement and the location of the bicycle thing. Because if you're not allowed parking, I think part of our thinking is there better be opportunities for bike storage. And it seems to me that what's being proposed is inadequate. Like, it's on the side of the building. I think that's particularly insecure in the neighborhood. And there's a lot of bike theft in North Kingstown. And it's a constant complaint. So I'm just wondering if the bicycle storage could be located at the back of the building and that it be enclosed in some way so that people actually will feel secure enough to actually have and, utilize the bicycle. Did you?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So there are a couple questions here about the bike parking. I don't know if Mr. O'Shea can pull up the presentation again. There is a site plan located on one of the slides.
Just bear with us for a second and we'll produce.
Perfect. So if we look at the site plan here, the top of the drawing is Queen Street and the bottom of the drawing is the adjacent lot lines in the back of the building. There isn't sufficient room to accommodate bike parking anywhere on site other than the place that it is currently proposed. The bike parking that's there on the side of the building is also going to be secured. There will be an ability to lock your bike so that it's not just there visible. And it is in a bit more of a secure location, being located interior to the site, so away from the street and near two entrances to the building. So it's not as though it's completely put up at the front of the property where it would be a little bit more visible. So from a SEPTED perspective, this area is a little bit more secure. And
You're saying that it's not actually that visible from the street or visible at all?
it will be visible from the street when you look down the driveway, but it's not as though it's right there on the street. There could be a vehicle parked in front of it, and it's located next to two entrance doors. So it's not tucked around behind the side of the building where no persons go. Here, it gives it a bit more eyes on the street perspective because there are patrons of the building who will be entering and exiting the site through the doors which are adjacent to the bike parking.
Yeah, that's not going to speak to security when people's garages are being opened and burgled for bikes, okay? Because that's a reality. But I don't know. I made my suggestion. I'd hate somebody to move in there and find out to their detriment that it doesn't work. It's not a good fit. So there's that. I want to say thank you for allowing the zoning for the reconversion to commercial. I understand why it's a bit different there, but that's a good provision. And the reason I brought up the bike thing is because I think it is related to the amenity area, which is pretty small. So, and I notice it's around the back, I guess. So that's my comments and my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member of the committee wish to comment or ask a question? Seeing none, Deputy Chair Kylie, would you take over for?
I do, and I recognize you.
Yeah, just very quickly. I totally agree with what Councillor Hutchison just said. I represent a district that has a high incidence of bike thefts, and the majority of bikes that are stolen are in backyards, and they have some form of lock on them. And so having it in a side visible from the street and locked will not, I don't think, adequately secure the bike. And that's a concern. And the other thing that we're forever bringing up is how many bedrooms we're putting in to buildings with only one parking space per unit. And until we get our comprehensive zoning bylaw to address that issue, we'll continue to be whistling into the wind on that particular issue. And I look forward to our staff recognizing that as an issue and bringing it back to be addressed in our upcoming comprehensive zoning bylaw. So thank you.
I yield the chair to you.
Thank you. Seeing no other hands, I will open this up to the public if there's any member of the public that wishes to make comment or ask questions.
Sure, Mr. Chair, I believe Mr. Sands had his hand raised earlier, so perhaps before we go to the public, we can let him speak as the agent.
Yes, absolutely.
You, Mr. Thompson, and for you, Mr. Chair, the only, I want to thank staff, Mr. Barr, for the presentation and the overview of tonight's application. The only one piece of that I would like to add is that the applicant, we continue to work with staff through the processing of the site plan control application. So just to confirm that this application is subject to site plan control. It's not yet obviously been finalized, and it will not be for until the conclusion of zoning. So through that process, we will absolutely take into consideration that bicycle location. From a quick review on a 0.6 meter side and rear yard, I do not, I'm confident that will not locate or fit in that location. However, the security of that bike rack can be something that's considered through site plan control. Secondly, I just wanted to mention that for this application, we're proposing 2 additional dwelling units, and the 2 existing dwelling units are in the existing building. So the on-site amenity space at 10 square meters per dwelling unit would necessitate in total through this 20 square meters. So I just wanted to point that one small consideration out as it relates to the relief being sought. It's around 4 square meters from 20 down to 15 as opposed to 40 based on the legal non-compliance of the legal non-complying existing situation. So thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I'm happy to answer any further questions in association with Mr. Barr.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So are there any members of the public that have requested opportunity to speak? I presume not.
Not at this time. Perhaps we'll do a first and second warning. It appears that they do not wish to speak, so go ahead, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. We need a mover and a seconder for the recommendation, and then it'll come back on the floor for the committee. Thank you, Councillor Hill. Thank you, Councillor Sanik. Any further questions or comments from the committee? Yes, Councillor Hutchison.
I'll be brief. Just following up on what Councillor Neal and I were saying before, I recognize that there's a tendency here to want to make this work, and there's limited flexibility on a site like this, and it does occur in the downtown with fair regularity. And so amenity space, parking, bicycles, storage is relatively minor to the larger issues involved with this application. I understand that that's the approach that staff would take. But we're down to, I think, 0.25 of the space in parking and bicycle storage, which I think is questionable, and amenity space that's pretty darn small. And the way I try to think about these things is, how are people, what quality of life are people going to have living in these spaces? Because it seems to me we're responsible for the nuts and bolts of that. And at some point we have to decide what's the minimum and does it mean anything? We have minimums, but we don't stick to them. And that's a bit disturbing. Now, in a case like this, you can say like, gee, Councillor Hutchison, it can't work any other way. So, and that's fine, but I'd like to know more about what the rationale is for the minimums. And because there have been cases where we have not stuck to them, unit size and so on. And I think we have to look ahead to, people have to live there. So that's my final comment. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think that was in the form of a question as well. If anybody, either the proponent
or now continue to raise it till we.
Okay.
Okay. So
Thank
get
you.
Explanation.
Thank you. I'm not sure there is an explanation. I don't see anybody jumping into the fray here. So I will, seeing no other hands, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. We'll move on to our second and last proposal in front of us, and that is Gore Road. Yes, 235 Gore Road.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Ms. Didrikson is the staff planner as well. I will note that there are several agents present representing the applicant.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. My name is Amy Didrikson. I'm a planner with the City of Kingston. I'm presenting a recommendation with respect to the zoning amendment for Gore Road. A public meeting was held on February 20th of this year. Next slide, please. The purpose and effect of the subject application is to apply a modified C2 zone to the subject property to enable a one-story, 2,000 square meter commercial development, which will accommodate 6 commercial units. I should also mention that the proposal will require site plan control approval. An application is currently under review. Next slide, please. The location's illustrated here in an aerial photo. The property is located east of Highway 15 and south of Gore Road. It's currently developed with a commercial plaza known as the Rideau Town Center. The commercial development is to be located in the southwest portion of the property that currently contains 17 trees and a stormwater management pond. There are a number of single-family dwellings in the neighborhood surrounding the property. There's also a bank in the northwest corner, fire station located to the west, and a retirement residence is under development in the southwest side of the property. Next slide, please. These photos are in the staff report, just illustrate the existing development. The Rideau Town Center is anchored by a grocery store. There's a number of commercial tenants in the plaza. The next slide illustrates some of the pathways. It's very well connected through paths to the adjacent neighborhoods, through a breezeway as well in the existing building. There's currently, in the top left, there's currently an informal path that's connecting to the homes on Winfield Crescent, and this is proposed to be formalized through the subject the proposed development. Next slide, please. This is the existing designation of the property is in a district commercial land use designation in the Rideau Community Secondary Plan. There's low density residential designation on the north, east, and south. District commercial areas are intended to be the major commercial business activity areas for the Rideau community, and Kingston East and shopping centers are limited to these designations. The proposed commercial use conforms to this overall policy direction. The next slide illustrates the existing zoning, and the C2 zone is proposed over the entire gray shaded area in a modified form, addressing some relief that was identified through the technical review. The MVC and the MVC1 zone are proposed to be removed. And I'll get into some details on that quickly in the upcoming slides. This is the proposed development concept. Hopefully, well, I'd like to highlight just a few changes from the public meeting. The applicant has increased the landscape buffer at the south side of the property to now stretch over the entire south lot line. And there's a number of additional tree plantings proposed here, which will of course be finalized or worked out through the site plan control application. There is an intent to plant some additional trees, which address some comments from forestry and parks and planning, as well as some comments that were received as part of the application. Garbage enclosures have been moved out of the required setbacks and are concentrated behind the proposed building. Landscape median has been added to the parking area of the proposed development, and a potential pathway is now shown, not just the pathway connecting to the properties to the south, but also potentially to the retirement residence, which is being redeveloped to the west. There does seem to be a desire for that pathway noticed on site. There's an informal trail that's formed there, so this will be explored further through the site plan application. There were comments received from 2 homeowners to the south, as well as comments received at the public meeting. There have not been any comments submitted since the staff report was finalized. The comments can be primarily grouped into the following headings, and I can get into any of these, the comments and responses in the question period if the committee would like to discuss them. In the next, oh, sorry, we haven't advanced in the slides. Sorry, James, I'm sort of going off on my own here. If you could go to the next slide, actually, please. These are the zoning provisions, or some excerpts of the zoning provisions that apply to the C2 zone. There were 3 areas that were identified through the technical review that required some relief. The first highlighted here is quite technical, relating to a setback between a zone that's not exclusively commercial or institutional. I can get into that further if it's of interest as part of questions, but in the next slide, there's 2 other items that are linked. Through further review, it was determined that the overall site did not meet the minimum landscaped open space requirement of 20%. Staff worked with the applicant to increase the landscaping, and it was able to be brought up to 18%. But that did eliminate approximately 41 parking spaces at the south side of the property. So that in turn required some parking relief from to a parking rate of 1 parking space per 19.25 square meters of gross floor area, which is consistent with the recent commercial plaza established on Highway 15, I believe, and consistent with other parking ratios applicable to shopping centers. Next slide, please. this is an excerpt from the staff report illustrating the permitted uses that are currently permitted in the mixed village center zones and what would subsequently be permitted in the C2 zone that would be applied. And intended to highlight there are some minor residential permissions that apply now. 2 dwelling units are currently permitted. And that's as well as a library. At a point in time, I think a library was thought of for this site, but ended up being established in the historic building on Gore Road. The next slide. A recommendation of approval is before the committee. Based on staff's review detailed in the staff report, the proposed zoning amendment is consistent with the official plan. Consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to the city's official plan. The proposed development will add additional commercial uses to an underutilized commercial site, which is fully serviced and within the urban boundary. The proposal meets the overall intent of the community, the Rideau Community Secondary Plan, by establishing additional commercial uses in one of the 2 district commercial designations, which are intended to be focal areas of commercial and business activity for the surrounding residential neighborhoods. The site design incorporates enhanced landscape buffering between the commercial uses and the residential end uses to the south, and will not result in adverse effects. No concerns were raised from the technical circulation of the zoning bylaw amendment from internal departments, and all comments received will be addressed through the required site plan application and associated agreement. And I welcome any questions from the committee.
Thank you. I will now open it up to the committee for questions or comments. Yes, Councillor Hutchison.
I know this site quite well because my mother lived very close, just to the left of the picture they showed us. At the seniors residence. I just have a couple of questions which were raised by the by nearby residents or related to their concerns, and that is, my impression was, well, you could just tell me, are there some trees that now are part of the buffering between the plaza and the residences to the south of the site coming out?
Oh, am I still unmuted, James? Sorry.
No, you're live.
Great. Through you, Mr. Chair, there are 4 trees which are proposed currently to be retained. 3 are at this along the south. There's 17 trees in total, 4 currently shown to be retained in the plans, and 3 of these are along the south. And then there's an additional 20 trees that have been shown in the latest plans to be planted along that south lot line. So there'll be an overall increase in the trees.
Great, thank you. I did see that there was replantings and so on there. I guess my question is to do with the quality of the buffering for sight and sound. And how large will those trees be? And I ask this because there was a concern in both the letters we received. I presume those are among the people that are concerned, will be concerned about this if we don't do it properly. So I'm just wondering if you know the size. And I say this because in my experience, if the trees aren't like 50 millimeters or more, they don't grow fast enough, aren't big enough so that people really appreciate them. And they're quite often just sticks in the ground that die off at quite a rate. So I'm just wondering what our requirements are for the replacement trees in that location.
Thank you. Ms. Stater?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Our replacement requirements are To my understanding, there isn't a specific requirement with respect to size, although we would certainly keep that in mind in reviewing the landscaping plans and what would provide the best screening on a year-round basis. The coniferous trees versus the leafy trees. Certainly from a planning perspective, we would look at that, and forestry and parks, I'm sure, would be looking at that from a certain point of view as well. The tree bylaw does require 2 trees for 1 tree in good condition to be provided as a replacement ratio. So if there's good trees in good condition on the site, there will need to be 2 in place that are planted. We'll certainly look at that closely as part of site plan control, but the intent is to provide visual buffering because certainly the loading area of the building is something that we would want to screen.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I just wanted to flag that. The other thing is on the parking, it's an interesting metric. So many spaces for so much commercial square footage. I take it staff understand that metric, and are they satisfied that enough parking spaces to serve that additional commercial development is satisfactory?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the parking ratio that's being proposed has been recently applied to the shopping center along Highway 15 that was recently approved. So it's thought to be a fairly up-to-date understanding of what is required for a shopping center of this nature. It's also similar to a number of parking rates that have been applied for shopping centers in the townships, Kingston Township as well as Pittsburgh Township. They're very close. And traditionally, based on aerial, I did do a scan of aerial photography, and it seems as though the plaza's been traditionally oversupplied with parking. So I don't have concerns with the parking rate that would now apply.
Good, thank you. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further questions or comments from the committee? Seeing none, I'll open this up to the public. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak?
This would also include the agents or the applicant if they're interested.
Yes.
However, Councillor Neal, it does not appear that anyone wishes to speak.
In that case, we'll go back to the committee. If there's a mover and a shaker, we can put this on the floor. Moved by Councillor Hutchison, seconded by Councillor Hill. Any further questions or comments from the committee? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. That ends our business portion for tonight. I'll just complete this. Before we move to adjournment, can I ask James and Derek and perhaps Councillor Kiley to stick around just for a minute to talk about something technical that had me in a panic. So, and anybody else that wants to. So we'll move on to motions, notices of motions, correspondence, date and time of our next meeting, Thursday, May 28th at 6:30 p.m. And I'll call for adjournment, but stick around those that wish to. Motion to adjourn. Thank you, Councillor Kiley. Thank you, Councillor Sanik. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much.
Councillor Neal, just give us a moment here before we continue.
Sure thing.